Okay, that seems to be working miraculously. Okay. So I guess we'll just have a couple more minutes. Let me test out, make sure everyone's on. Yep. Oh, okay. Sorry. All right. I guess we're still a little bit early, so um,
We don't have any hold music,
I know.
like a
Sorry.
QCAN theme or something.
I'm gonna put the spotlight on you, Sarah, since you're gonna be doing the first. Oh wait, I have to put it on
Actually, Julie will.
Julie. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Sorry. Julie? Oh, she's not there yet. Oh, there you are. Okay.
So
Okay.
how come I can see the QCAN and I'm looking at it correctly and mine looks backwards.
It's because you probably have a setting on there called
Oh,
mirror image,
I do. Mirror image.
so that when you look at yourself in the screen, when you go to the right, it looks like a mirror rather than you going to the other side. But it looks
Yeah.
okay to us. The writing looks fine to us.
Okay. That's all I care about.
Um, okay, so I think we're live streaming, and Julie, do you?
Just testing my mic. You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, but it's not 7 yet. So.
Okay. All right.
Should I start? I'm going to start the Zoom recording. How's that sound?
That
Just
sounds good. Yeah. I'm gonna I'm gonna go off video so I can do things.
So we have 3 candidates or more. How many are? Sorry, how many candidates do you have tonight?
There's 4 of us for at large, Julie.
Okay,
Mhm.
great, thanks. I think we'll go ahead and start if that's okay with folks. Hi, and welcome to the Candidates Night. My name is Julie Malazzi, and I'm a QCAN board member. I want to really thank you all for coming, and especially the candidates for Quincy City Council election. The election is on November 2nd. And our candidates tonight will be answering questions related to local climate and environmental issues. Just a little bit of background about QCAN. Quincy Climate Action Network is we are an all volunteer organization, and we act locally to fight climate change. by promoting climate-friendly practices among residents, businesses, and government. And the issues we work on include things like clean energy, sustainable transportation, energy-efficient buildings, natural resources, and environmental justice. QCAN meets on the second Wednesdays of each month at 7 p.m. We've been meeting during the pandemic on Zoom, and we'll continue doing that until it's safe to mix in some in-person meetings. You can find the link on quincycan.org. We're always open and welcoming of visitors to our meetings and new members. So that's all on QCAN, and now I will turn it over to my fellow board member, Sarah Belfort, who will explain how this is going to work tonight.
Thank you, Julie, and welcome to everyone. We will start with questions for the at-large candidates before moving into questions for ward candidates in the second part of the forum. That portion will be moderated by Keith Johnson, and we aim to finish up by 9 o'clock at the latest. We sent many, but not all of the questions in advance to candidates on September 28th. All of the candidates received these questions via email at the same time. To cover as much ground as possible, we'll have to keep answers short, often 30 seconds to 1 minute. Maggie McKee will say time when your time is up. And she's already explained this a little bit in advance. We will switch up the order of responses, so no worries, no one will be first every time. Some of our questions were suggested by other local organizations, and when we get to these questions, they will be posed by representatives of the organizations. This is our first time hosting this event on Zoom, so please bear with us if there are any difficulties, and we'll do our best to work it out. Finally, as you all have seen, we are recording the event. The video will be available to view on quincycan.org by Saturday morning, and it will soon be on qatv.org as well. Are there any questions about this from the candidates especially? Okay then, we will begin with our first question for Noel DeBona. You will each have 45 seconds to respond. Question is, how is climate change affecting our city?
I want to thank QCAN for giving this opportunity tonight to actually be in front of you tonight. Climate changing in the city. Well, you know, it's my responsibility as a city councilor at large to make initiatives at the city council level. I believe over the last 6 years of being a city council representative, I brought forth resolutions on combating the climate change and the climate increase in our city. I've brought about resolutions about fleets of all battery electric vehicles, whether it be at the MBTA level to initiate change at the MBTA for the new South Quincy MBTA yard. And now into fruition has been other fleet vehicles coming into where we just got a grant from the state for $200,000, and we're getting 5 new police cruisers, electric vehicles, and hybrids. So I think some of the work that I've done over the last 6 years is coming into fruition today. Thank you.
Thank you. And now to Bill Burke. Oh, you maybe
Yep.
on, okay.
Yeah. And the question is, how is climate change affecting the Quincy area?
Yes.
I think the obvious things here would be in all kinds of bad ways, because climate change is pollution. Pollution is causing the climate change, and pollution is bad. But I think the most impact is that people feel and think is going on is the rising tides, the rising sea level. You know, which affects us greatly here in Quincy. And I know there's been a lot of work and a lot of talk about the seawalls going on. Happening, especially down in Howes Neck and things like that. Okay, just those two.
Thank you. Ann Mahoney.
Well, I want to thank QCAN and all of the organizations that are providing us this opportunity to speak tonight. And Quincy residents are being affected by climate change, and it's being shown in both heat, rain, snow, flooding, and the impact is on these impacts are showing in our environment, from plants to animals to trees, and to accelerated sea level rises and longer and more intense heat waves and storms, the intensity and frequency of precipitation, the warmer oceans that are increasing our water that evaporates into the air, and our seawaters that are breaching our new seawalls, which have just been built, and they're actually higher, and we're seeing it already breaching those walls. So yeah, Quincy is seeing the real effect of climate change, and it's real and it's affecting our city. And we do need to work more diligently and harder to make sure that we're preventing those things as we go forward.
Time.
And Dina Lang.
Thank you. And I will quickly just, of course, thank Maggie and all the board members at QCAN for having us here tonight. Climate change obviously is impacting us as well as everyone else that we could possibly think of in different communities. And, to my colleague's point, we've done a lot of good work on the city council in my time here, right, passing the resolve to call for all of our city vehicles to move to an electric fleet. We've seen the implementation and funding for some protected bike lanes across the city. We've seen a lot of infrastructure improvements and dedicated funding to that. We created the new Natural Resources Department to have a dedicated tree warden to protect the trees across the city, so that when there's a call that comes in, we're not cutting down healthy trees across the city. But all of that being said, there's more that we need to do, because ultimately, in addition to the issues that we have with the seawalls and flooding, we have a lot of congestion and a lot more development happening here in the city. And at the end of the day, it's a quality of life issue. This goes to one of the things that you guys had brought up to us actually about us being an environmental justice community. And we have over now 101,000 residents here in the city, a lot of them being minority and English as a second language. And so if we talk about the impact, it really is overall a quality of life issue. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Our next question will be first for Anne Mahoney.
Mhm.
You have up to a minute to respond to this one.
Okay.
Is our city prepared for climate change now and in the future?
I think we're
How
working.
so? Yeah.
I think we're
Yeah.
working towards it, but we've been really reactionary to some of those things. And many of it has come from the floods and the events that we've had from 2018, from the seawalls and the things that we've been doing. So we need to be resilient in the way we're thinking and helping our community navigate the events so that we can continue to flourish despite climate changes. And we can anticipate those events. I know when people are getting flooded, they know to move things out of their basement, and we know how to help them, but we have to be more resilient about the things that we're doing. Some of the things that we can do is we can adopt a green infrastructure program, which is really determining where and how plants and trees and urban environments are being planted, and keeping those trees and plants alive and not taking down viable trees. We've seen that happen throughout our whole city. Cities that have experimented with this green infrastructure have seen positive impacts. And I want to see more of that happen here at Quincy, so that we can connect our ecosystems and improve the health and the human health, and lower the risk for environmental disorders. And the other thing that we really need to work hard with in the city of Quincy is collaborating with our neighbors and making sure that we're working with our colleges and universities, so we can work thoroughly to collaborate to build a adaptation plan for Quincy.
Okay. Next to Nina.
Thank you. I think yes and no, right? Again, to the early points that I had made, we certainly have made some progress. But like my frustrations with government before I came in and during the time I'm in here, government moves very, very, very slowly. And one of the biggest things that I think is an overarching problem that won't get solved is that we continue to have a lot of development here in the city, right? I understand the need for affordable housing units. I understand the housing shortage that we have here. But again, with the growing population that we have, if we don't crack down and do an overall assessment of our very, very, very outdated zoning code, this building will continue to happen in such a way that's not amenable to something that we want to see down the line, which is, thinking of reliable transportation, right? Alternative means of transportation, making sure that folks that are, moving into areas that are very, very densely populated, that there's ease of access to public transportation, that there's alternative means of transportation available, that there's protected sidewalks for folks to be able to walk instead of getting in their cars and driving 5 minutes down the road, right? These are all things that are not being considered. And if they are, they're being considered piecemeal, right? And so if you ask us, are we prepared? Maybe with small steps, but in the overarching scheme of things, if we don't crack down on how we are zoning for development across the city, thank you.
Okay, and we'll go to Noel.
Thank you for the question. Over the last few years, I've worked with the tree warden, Chris Haywood, on allowing a city inventory of all the trees, trying to get a basis of what we have for inventory out there and what we can do to replant other trees around the area to make it more vibrant for our citizens of the city. Also, being a board member of the Community Preservation Committee for the last 6 years, we've always made initiatives for open green space, more parks, more purifications. I think a lot of the development that's happening in the city, what we're trying to do and evolving in is having conditions and concessions that these developers put into the landscape, trees, scapes, and that open park, open green space besides their buildings that they're building. In the downtown that we've put and initiated a lot of that. We're doing the infrastructure work with the parks, like you see at the General's Bridge right now, which is stuff that you're going to have to do before the development actually comes in. So I think we have a lot of work to do. I think over the last 6 years, we've done a lot. I've done a lot of great work to help and work with the administration. Thank you.
Okay, and Bell.
Yes. Are we ready? Is the town ready for climate change? I don't think so. That would be a question for Tom Koch. He has a total understanding of that whole story. I don't think so. How can you be ready for climate change when that means to me is water spilling over the walls and flooding half the town? I mean, that would be a catastrophe. I don't know what that would entail when and if that would happen, but how could we be ready for that? I just can't fathom it, and I hope not to see it. That's it. Do I think it'll but the good point is everybody has it on the tip of their tongue, and everybody wants a solution for this, and everybody wants to try and help, and that's the good part. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. For the next question, we'll actually be starting with Bill, and there will again be 1 minute to respond to this one. The question is Quincy communicating well with residents, indeed all residents, in regard to climate preparedness, climate risks, and climate change mitigation efforts? What could the city and its elected officials do better?
The answer would be no. And the resolution to that would be to better inform the people. And how will we get that done? City probably has communication people. City has a Facebook page, and we could probably bring it out that way, as well as groups like QCAN. They can publish information and spread the word around town. And, you know, somebody could just make an effort, make the decision, let's spread this around town more, and it'll happen. I think that needs to come from the top.
And next to Noel.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's a collaboration of using and working with other organizations like yourself, teaming up with Quincy Tree Alliance. I know I sat down with Ann McPherson, Meyerson, as well as your QCAN, David Reich, and all the other members, and working together, because it does cost funding. It does cost money to mail stuff in the mail. It's free to do the internet and the Facebook and all those measures, but sometimes it's even better to go door to door, and you're going to need manpower. And if we work together collaboratively as a city, as city councilors and organizations, we can get boots on the ground and help out in that aspect. I remember when we had a situation with the rat, the rat mania that's happening in Quincy, and we went door to door and we educated folks, and that's how we're going to have to do it with climate change. Door to door, boots on the ground, helping each other out. Thank you.
Next to Nina.
Thank you. I like to always say that we can always do better, particularly in this situation. Over the years, we've had a number of different community meetings. We've had a lot of resources provided by DPW. There's actually one, for example, I actually found this the other day. It says, reduce, reuse, recycle on it. It's a lot of really good information. Again, to Noel's point, partnering with community organizations like QCAN, QTA, Quincycles, ELM, and the resources that all of you provide are phenomenal. There are a lot of incentives out there that we've heard about, like the tree planting incentive across the city, electrifying your home, inserting solar panels on the roof of your homes. But none of that is going to be communicated to residents if they can't, speak or read English, right? And so one of the things that I had done this past year that I'm really proud of is actually implement and work with the mayor to fund a language access program that essentially will provide translation, and interpretation services for departments across the city, especially for reasons like this, right? We have phenomenal resources out there coming from within the city, a lot of folks working in City Hall to put out this kind of information and these resources. But again, it's going to be useless if it doesn't connect with residents who can make use of those things. And so a pamphlet just like this that has a page and a half about, free tire pickup and disposal needs to be well connected with residents who need to use it.
And Anne.
Thank you. I'm gonna pick up where Nina left off because I think she made some really great points. And climate change is a really difficult. It's not an easy thing to communicate, right? So it's hard. I mean, we do all the research and it takes a lot for us to understand it. So we really need to make sure we're communicating in the appropriate languages, and then also using metaphors and analogies to really kind of tie that story together, and then combining that with really good storytelling, because climate change has to be impacted to everybody. If we're not all on the same board, then we're not probably all going to be able to do this. The other thing is there's a lot of people in Quincy that are visual learners, so we want to make sure we're using visual imagery and experiential scenarios to be able to really explain to them what it is that we're doing. These communications are really important because some people don't understand what climate change is, and we have to balance all of this with scientific information and deliver it through trusted messages, just like QCAN, Quincy Making Waves, the Quincy Tree Alliances, in group settings. So this does have to come down from the top. You have to actually believe that this is the information that needs to be shared, and that we have an actual plan on how we're going to be able to attack those things. But the communication has to be broken down so that more people can understand it, we can get more people on board, and we can continue those conversations and grow as a community. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. So next we will go first to Nina with 30 seconds to respond. And this question comes from Quincy Tree Alliance and will be asked by Maggie McKee. Maggie.
Thank you. Companies that do business with the city sometimes also donate to candidates for elected office. For example, in 2018, the City Council awarded Bogan Tree Service a $244,000 contract to remove 300 large street trees without first having a list of trees that were deemed unsafe to the public and in need of removal. Campaign finance records show that in the previous 2 calendar years, Bogan Tree's owner donated $750 to 2 of the city councilors who voted for that contract to be awarded. Also, developers who may need to cut down trees or plan green spaces have donated tens of thousands of dollars to city officials. Would you commit to refusing these contributions, which represent at least the appearance of a conflict of interest?
Thank you for the question. I think it's really important to acknowledge and be very transparent and honest about donations and who they're supporting. I appreciate you, Maggie, bringing that up. To be very frank with you, I'm curious myself. I'd want to go back and take a look to see if I'm one of those city councilors. But to be honest with you, if that's something that is a concern, I would want to make sure that I can commit to that if it makes sure to quell the concern of those that are tuning in, or even the residents across the city, whether it's them or individuals in the city, private groups, public groups, whoever it is. At the end of the day, it's our job to make sure that we're listening to everyone that we represent. And one of these things that I think is super important is, again, the transparency of the entire process, right? Making sure that we are being very upfront and honest with those that we represent, making sure that we answer those questions, making sure, frankly, at the end of the day, that we are doing what it is that we need to represent everyone across the city. And we explain why we are voting the way that we vote. If we come in and we just say yes or no to a vote on something, and we're not being transparent about how we came to that decision, then I think that is also a concern, regardless of who's donating to certain candidates, because you have to also think about how folks are helping campaigns in other ways. Thank you.
Anne?
Thank you very much for this question. And first, I just want to make sure people are aware that the City Council does not award contracts. So it's a bid process and it's delivered by the state, but I understand the nature of the question and I'm very sensitive to it. I will say that I have in the past and even in this current campaign have received donations in the mail from developers that have active projects in the city, proposals that are before our city council. And I would like to let everybody know that although they send them to me, I do not cash them. So yes, I will continue to not accept known contributions from developers or people who have active projects before us in the city council, because I personally believe that we need to be able to look people honestly in the eyes and push back as strong as we can, because oftentimes people don't do that. So I want to make sure I can.
Next to Bill.
Hi. I didn't like that about Mr. Bogan from Bogan Tree, $250,000 to remove trees in there. Did I hear that there might be some speculation that he didn't take down all the correct trees or all the trees at all? Was there some impropriety there with him? I hope not. Mr. Bogan's a great house net guy. I know him myself. He's a good man. I hope there was no. Anyway, the city would check to make sure that he did his job correctly anyway, and they wouldn't let any improprieties happen there. And I'm the only thing that maybe should have been a point.
Time.
Okay.
Yes, Noel?
Yes, to pick up a little bit off with the bidding process, we awarded the funding for the trees to be done, but the bidding process did not come through the city council. That was done in by the administration. We approved the funding, and then it goes and disperse off, and it has to be bidded out, and we have probably almost no say in that. And then it gets bidded out, and that's how the process is worked out. As for campaign finance reports, I mean, OCPF, you can, as transparent as you can be, is you can look this up at each candidate that what they get for funds that are out there. So, and then they put it out every 2 weeks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and the next question, Noel will be first to respond to that one with 45 seconds for a response. And this question comes from Quincy, and so I'll turn it over to Irene Litz.
Hi, thanks for having us this evening. So my question is with regard to our transportation network. Recent state-funded Complete Streets projects and Shared Streets and Spaces projects have accelerated the growth of Quincy's bike network and made improvements to pedestrian safety. What will you do to boost the city's investment in safe, connected, active transportation options for residents of all ages?
Thank you for the opportunity and that question tonight. I know, Irene, over the last 6 years as being a city councilor and even being on the school committee for 2 years, 8 years now, I've been out with you on some rides. I've brought my kids out, my son, and we've rode with you on these ways. A lot of the new streets that are impacted are state funded, and they got the guidelines to put in these bicycle lanes. And over the last 6 years of being in the city, you can see them almost everywhere now. And we're trying to make it more pedestrian and bike friendly. And I think we're doing a pretty good job. And I know I've attended some of your meetings, and you guys have been very vocal on us pushing these forward. And I think I've done a very good job with listening and responding to getting these into the city. And then we're also making it very, very safe for our pedestrians and our vehicles around there. Thank you.
Hey, next to Bill.
Yes. 1 second about that last question. I will not take a dime in campaign contributions from anybody ever. Period. This question is Quincy Cycles. I think the guy who heads that organization is Bob, who is my neighbor. What can I do to make transportation around Quincy safer? I don't think much, what could I do? I'd be open to suggestions. I'd be open to the right answer. If you have it, come forward. I'm with you. I'll do it.
Next we go to Anne.
Thank you very much. I think we need to continue collaborating and ensuring that we're doing as much as we can to continue to build out the infrastructure that has started. The goal with our city should be able to create that viable communities, especially for the most vulnerable people who live in our city, including children, people with disabilities, older adults, people who don't have access to cars. I know bikes are very important, but it's also important for everybody who lives in our city to feel straight, and the Complete Street programs to improve quality, safety, and public health while reducing transportation and cost and traffic. The Shared Street program is also an amazing program, and we want to make sure we can continue to do that with safe places to walk, ride, and also giving restaurants opportunities to close streets so they can have outdoor dining. And then I just really want to focus on the good things that are happening, where we've received $114,000 recently to reconstruct pedestrian facilities, including ramps and improved traffic signals adjacent to both low income and senior housing developments. We got that back in April. So collaborating with all of you, and then also the state and federal monies are important too. Thank you.
Okay, and Nina.
Thank you. So yes, the Complete Streets program, I think, should not only provide improvements to alternative means of transportation, which is something that we had spoken about earlier today, with bike lanes, access to public transit, whether that's access to the T station or reliable and timely bus lines, but pedestrian safety as well. But we need to also take a look and make sure we're prioritizing investments in our infrastructure. So that's sidewalk repair, making sure that there's ADA compliance across the board on that. The lighting, right? Like making sure that whether it's city lighting or state lighting with DCR, working with them to make sure that there's adequate lighting across the city to make sure it's safe for folks to actually go out and walk across the city. We need to make sure that we're spending money on quelling the speeding that continues to happen across the city. We reduced the speed limit from 30 to 25, set up some speed traps, invested in those. We invested in those crosswalks now that have flashing lights to ensure that pedestrians remain safe in areas that are usually prone to speeding. But we also need to make sure that we're putting more bike lanes across the city as well. There's a lot of work to still be done.
All right, now we arrive at our first question with up to 2 minutes of response time. And this one will be first to Ann Mahoney. The question comes from Quincy Making Waves and will be asked by Pam Brennan.
Thank you. Since the 2018 storms, many small cottages in House Neck neighborhoods that saw 6 to 8 feet of storm flooding have been replaced by much larger buildings. Sea levels are rising and storms are intensifying with climate change. So we can expect more emergency rescues in flood zones in the future. The 2019 Quincy Multi-Hazard Mitigation Plan suggests sorry about that, I'm losing my place. Suggests reducing risk by changing zoning laws to avoid new construction in flood-prone areas. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers also suggests that the city buy properties in flood-prone Willow section of House Neck to restore the marsh there. If elected, would you support ordinance to ban new construction and have the city buy properties in flood-prone areas? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. So for those of you who don't know, the Jewett Street development is a perfect example of what we should not be doing in Quincy. I encourage people to learn more about this and how the neighborhood had major pushback in regards to trying to stop this from happening. In 2018, these neighbors on Jewett Street had to swim to the dike because the floodwaters were over their heads, and they want to develop more on that area. The proposed project to build the 2-family, and that seems small, but it's a 2-family that was right up against the dike, was recently approved by the Conservation Committee. Jewett Street is one street over from the Willow Street area where the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had a presentation on restoring the marsh and potentially taking homes. By the way, Quincy sponsored this. The Conservation Commission knew nothing about this meeting or the report. Other commissions should be aware of these meetings, and these reports should be made public as well, especially to the neighborhoods that would be impacted. When the neighbors pushed back to hold the vote and to learn more about the context of the Army Corps discussion, the commission said that they had heard enough and they wanted to vote to approve this project. That's very problematic when you have multiple things that are happening. I feel all these reports should be public. Our commissions and our boards who approve these developments should be aware of these issues and the approvals of the developments that should have been put on hold. I want to know what the mitigations are and who's going to be impacted by the purchase of any of these homes before committing to this, because I think we should all know what's happening with regards to the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I just think we should need more information before I could commit on that. But I would also like to say I would commit to adding an ordinance to protect wetlands and flood area prone areas, as well as a full review of our zoning laws. Our neighborhoods are being destroyed by some of the development that's happening. Single family homes are turning into multi-units, and you're seeing giant things happen all over the city, and there's no pushback. Every time you go to a meeting, the answer is yes, because somebody else was told yes. We need to stop that, because development should be happening in the right places, but it shouldn't be happening in our neighborhoods, and I will support that. So thank you very much for the question.
Next to Nina.
Thank you. So right now in the State House, there's actually a proposed bill on flood risk protection. And just for folks' information, it's House Bill 983 and the Senate Bill 603. And if you take a look at it, it actually includes important language for initiatives such as creating a flood risk protection trust fund that actually helps to cover the acquisition of properties from willing owners, structured demolition and relocation of impacted property owners in these marsh areas, tenants, their lessees, et cetera, in coastal floodplain and wetland restoration, and also helps to fund the creation of open space for conservation and recreational purposes. And it will be protected in perpetuity, right? So this is an incredible initiative. And that's just one piece of this bill that I think we should definitely be in support of. and make sure that folks find out about it so they can be in support of it as well. In the meantime, walking across the city, particularly in the House Neck area, which was the topic of this question, I was knocking on doors the other day and saw a house that looked like from the street where I was standing, that it was actually in the marsh. Like if you take a look at where it stood and there were no houses next to it, that's really jarring, and then talking to a neighbor across the street who said that there's a marsh behind her house that's not even connected to the water, but actually tucked back in the neighborhood. And over the years that she's lived there, she's seen the erosion and how it's really dried out over time. And if we don't take a look at the impacts that we have with development currently happening here in the city, we can't wait for something like this bill to come down the pike to provide funding to buy these buildings, right? Those are long-term solutions. If we're looking at immediate solutions, what I think we can do on the city council, again, is look at the citywide zoning assessment to see where we are developing, to see where there's some more lax zoning codes that we need to crack down on. Because once we do that, those are immediate changes to ensure that these developments aren't happening tomorrow, that they're not getting sent to zoning board next week, that they're not looking for approvals a month from now. So I think we can do both of those approaches. It always comes back to, again, collaborative efforts, right? What can we do here on the city council in the role and capacity that we have to quell this problem? But on top of that, what can we do to branch out of that to look at other resources, such as this state bill that could provide a lot of funding for us to then use to purchase these properties, right? To ensure that we're maintaining these wetlands. I think, again, those collaborative efforts are really important to be effective.
Noel, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. This has been a big issue item that ever since the March 2018 flooding that happened. And 2 months prior, there was some flooding in January of 2018 over on the causeway in Swanham. So it goes on both of the peninsulas. I was out there at both events, and I could tell you that the peninsula became an island, and they were flooded right up to the dike. And as for today, what are we doing today? I've been a big proponent for new seawalls, repairings of it, and also Army Corps of Engineers with studies on the Willow area for pumping stations. And I've stood up against variances for different construction in these particular areas. I'm a big proponent for rezoning, especially to protect our neighborhoods and the folks that live in them. There's a lot of reconstruction and rebuilding that's going on and throughout the city. And in some areas they're good, but in a lot of the coastal areas, it's very risky. I've been up at Conservation Commission and Conservation Committee meetings against certain variances to do certain projects. And I'll continue to be out in front of each particular one. I've actually worked with the emergency management director, and I've been a proponent and funding that position to help out. I think instead of being reactive, we need to be proactive. And that position is ready for a proactive approach on mitigation for any type of emergencies. And when it happens, then you're reactive. And that's what happened with the flooding of 2018 in March and as well as in January. And I think we've come a long way, but we've got to work together collaboratively with the emergency management, police department, first responders, fire department, and all the local aides that can help out. Red Cross, Salvation Army, there's all kinds of other organizations like yourself that can come in and help out in time of need. But we've lived through it. Hopefully we've mitigated some of the particular areas of the city, and we'll continue to do a lot more. Thank you.
And Bill?
Yes, I am with QCAN's position 100%. Building in property that has been flooded with 6 feet of water, I understand people own that property. Maybe there should have been something to buy it back from them so they wouldn't build there. And that's what should happen. That's all there is, right? And I like what Nina said about the government program that they're talking about up in the State House to help buy back those pieces of property. Also, we have the community preservation money that maybe could buy some of it back. But we should not be building in flood zones. We should help restore these marshes. Let's do it right, get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. For the next question, we had planned 30 seconds only response time, but I'm going to ask for 45 seconds for each person since we're doing great on time right now. Thank you to everyone. This one will be first to Bill Burke. It's about buildings. Buildings are responsible for 54% of Quincy's greenhouse gas emissions. Boston City Council recently unanimously approved an ordinance that requires large buildings there to cut emissions of greenhouse gases stepwise until they are eliminated in 2050. What can Quincy's council do to cut emissions from our buildings?
Cut emissions or eliminate emissions? I'm a little ignorant about this. I was thinking about this when I saw the question that you sent me. How can a building eliminate the use of energy and produce it by itself? Produce all the energy it needs by itself? Do I have that wrong? Is that the core of the question?
This is really the forum to be. I believe there were some background materials sent. The idea with, for example, with net zero buildings is that they would be perhaps very energy efficient, perhaps having solar panels on their roofs. This is just like an idea of what a net zero building is.
I'll just stop you right there. I only have 45 seconds.
And that's no, I'm not. Sorry, we can just to have a little extra time here. And just to finish off what that is, if the building is still using more energy than it can produce, then there's offsets. For example, supporting a solar energy elsewhere, or wind, or whatever. But that's the concept of like how a building could minimize or even kind of eliminate.
Sure.
Just roughly for anybody who's watching, who's curious about that.
Okay, yeah, I'm all on board. All on board. Try to be as fuel efficient and energy efficient and recycle as much as you can. I'm all on board with that. And I think a lot of people are, and the city governments are as well. And it's probably cost efficient to try to save some money on energy as well. So it's a win-win all the way around for everybody to keep working on it. Thank you.
Next to Noel.
Yes, I mean, just to go back real quick on the Quincy Public Schools, we've put all solar panels on those and we've got them up and running, and we did that. I was on the school committee at the time. But going back to the buildings, and you have to build some type of incentive program, whether it be anything that's energy efficient will give you an incentive program or some type of funding back to do it. I know that putting solar panels on the roofs or using the proper appliances in particular, and anything that's green would give you some type of initiative, some type of incentive program to give you funding back or give you some type of discount. And those are things that are programs that you're going to have to work with also the state, as well as other agencies that have that funding in place. I think we can build a fund with that here in the city of Quincy as well. Looking forward to maybe initiating something like that.
Okay, thank you. Nina?
Thank you. First and foremost, I think looking at the ordinance itself that they had passed in Boston, and then taking that and moving forward in a collaborative way with folks is best suited for us and best suited for the type of work that I always do, right? Is I always like to take a look and see, okay, what is it that we can do here in the city? And then I like to partner with those who are more well-versed in this work, such as, again, QCAN, QTA, ELM, to see, from that ordinance in Boston, what's actually going to work best for us here in the city of Quincy. To my knowledge, they actually modeled it in Boston off of similar measures too in New York, St. Louis, and Washington, D.C. And so that's how it works, right? It's collaborative efforts between different, forms of government, different bodies of government, but then taking what works and making sure that we create something that works best here in the city of Quincy. There's one thing in particular that I think would work well for us, which is modeling after them this ordinance that creates a building's emissions investment fund. So essentially what they do is if they say, okay, your building is 30,000 square feet, you have X amount of years to make sure that you reach a certain percentage of emissions. And if you don't meet that, you then get fined. We can use those funds to then, basically go back into the city's coffers and put that back into our lower income communities that we have here across the city. Again, this goes back to the earlier point I was bringing up, that we are an EJ community here for 3 reasons, right? Minorities, English as a second language, and income, right? Inequality. And so if we're going to support those communities, we need to make sure we have funding to do so. And I think this kind of ordinance can help support that.
Okay. Anne?
So I agree with several people that several other things that have been said, but I think honestly, what we've been focused on in the city of Quincy in our development is the tallest buildings we can build. But rather than being focused on the tallest buildings, maybe we should be focused on having the most energy efficient buildings. And to do that, we really need to understand those codes and requiring what those efficiencies are, and then also how they impact our residential, commercial, and municipal buildings, so that we wouldn't have any, so that the energy would be more efficient. Energy that we use would be what we generate out of those buildings. Throughout Massachusetts currently, we're seeing new net zero buildings being constructed, including schools and homes and laboratories. They come with a cost, and I really do want to make sure that we're careful that we're not pricing people out of Quincy. And I'm responsible for that because we're getting priced out of Quincy already from all the development that we're having, but we have to be responsible in the advancement of both climate policy and housing production and protection. As a city council, we should be holding the line on what's being proposed by the administration and ensure that we're planning and that we're insisting that the buildings that we do have a say on, that we're building for the future, and we're making sure that they're meeting the qualities for the needs for climate change in the future. So I think this goes back to, the administration is the one who gets to direct these things. We can certainly make ordinances and different things, but if the administration isn't holding the line to it, then we're not going to be able to meet those needs. So thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move to another guest question. This one will go first to Nina. You will each have 2 minutes to respond. This one is from Quincy for Transformative Change, and I will turn it over to Paige Watson.
Hi, everyone. 83% of Quincy's residents live in environmental justice communities, areas that have any of the following characteristics: low income, a high percentage of people of color, and a high rate of non-English speakers. Some neighborhoods with 2 or more of these qualifying characteristics, like Germantown and Quincy Point, border the Fore River Basin, a longtime industrial site that houses a newly built natural gas compressor station. Even before the compressor station went in, these neighborhoods had elevated rates of heart attacks, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, hospitalizations, and lung cancer, all of which may be due to environmental pollution. These same neighborhoods have fewer trees than the average Quincy neighborhood, which means they are more prone to extreme heat and flooding. What ordinance, if any, will you propose to address these environmental inequities?
Thank you for the question, Paige. I can't help but sort of fumble a little bit because I do feel very personal about this question. I feel like I identify with what makes us an EJ city. I'm from Germantown originally. That's where my parents are originally from. We're a minority. Most of my family has English as a second language. And growing up, we had income inequalities that we had to face. And, as far as what ordinances we can pass, I think, one of the first things, first and foremost, that I'm always making sure to prioritize is that whatever we put into effect is going to be ineffective, right? To support these communities like mine and my parents, if we don't have the connection with access, right? And language access, I think, is so critical when it comes to this work. And so I do want to just mention back to, the work I had done to create language access here across the city, because whatever initiatives we put out, again, if we're not connecting with people like my parents, who, when they were in their early 30s, were trying to catch the bus out of Germantown to go to work, but had to walk, if they get a flyer in the mail that talks to them about, hey, here are some incentives that you can take advantage of, and they can't actually read that flyer, my dad, my mom, they're not going to be able to take advantage of that, right? So language access is so critically important to any ordinance that we put out there. Representation truly matters in this kind of work. And again, if we're talking about long-term effects of climate change and all the amazing questions that we're asked here tonight about ordinances and resolves and things that we can support, if we're not connecting to those residents like my mom and dad when they were here 30 years ago, it's going to fall on deaf ears. And frankly, we're not going to be impactful as local government members. And so I think there's a lot of work that we need to do, but first and foremost, we need to make sure that whatever it is we put out there is accessible to those that we represent in these communities, whether they have English as a second language, whether they identify as a minority, whether they have income inequality gaps. We need to make sure that we're considering what they're experiencing on a daily basis and take that into consideration when we're doing the work we're doing up at City Hall. If you aren't going through it and you aren't recognizing it as an issue, and you aren't factoring that into your work, well, then you're not addressing the people that are facing these issues day in and day out. And so again, when it comes to this question, as a Germantown kid who, again, grew up as a minority in a household with English as a second language, what could have helped me with these kinds of issues with, accessing bike lanes and making sure my parents had access to public transportation was, making sure that somebody came and spoke to us. right? Engaged with us, asked us, what are the issues that we're facing here in the city when it comes to reliable access and transportation, to feel like, our voice is heard. So thank you for that question. I really appreciate it.
Next to Anne.
Thank you. So I absolutely agree with you, Nina, and applaud you for that answer. So low-income residents and immigrants, people with disabilities, and those with pre-existing medical conditions, they're the most risk. They're our at-risk population from devastating health and economic impacts to climate change. Solar panels are not the solution for these families to combat climate change. We must meet people where they are. We need to really listen and fully immerse ourselves into the understanding and the impact of what's happening and how are they being marginalized and disenfranchised from our community. And then addressing the impact of climate change that will require a commitment from all of our residents. That's why it's so important that we're able to communicate to everybody. Therefore, decisions that we make about climate change is an impact needs to be inclusive and take into consideration the multilingual dissemination of information. And Quincy needs to not only just do that, we also need to be able to communicate to people and let them know and track and address environmental health metrics. We're just gone through a pandemic. Quincy needs to empower the Quincy Public Health Commissioner to fully track the data and publicly and clearly report that data on a regular basis, so the city can respond with that data and the information and invest both environmentally and in treatment and prevention. And that tracking should also include the air quality and the moderations of the neighborhoods. We mentioned the frac station. Those are the things that we really need to pay attention to. We have to adopt that green infrastructure and make sure that we're putting those trees and plants and not cutting down trees, but really, making that ecosystem, improving the health and quality and the risks of our environmental disasters. And for this to happen, we need our administration to wake up and listen and engage, not use the COVID money that we received, $46 million, for land acquisitions that will not improve our climate changes, will not improve our economic challenges, and certainly will not improve the lives or anybody that's living in as our residents live here in the city of Quincy. We need to demand more from this administration when it comes to this. And it really does frustrate me because we just lived through something that none of us ever imagined we would, and we're not done yet. And that money's supposed to last a lot longer than it's going to. So thank you very much for this question.
Thank you. Bill?
The Fall River Bridge compressor station, it's horrible. It's an environmental disaster waiting to happen. There's some wonderful people. The Democratic Party leader over in Weymouth, who's leading the fight and still is leading the fight against that to get it out of there. It's not needed. It's not wanted. It's the impact, the medical impact on the people in Germantown and North Weymouth and South Quincy is, it's eminent. That the emissions from there is going to cause some problems, and we don't need it there. And the fight was on, and I did not see enough people down there, enough politicians to turn it around. I understand that it probably comes from the federal government because the pipeline is coming across the country, some parts of the country, but the mayor could have stood up. The mayor, not the mayor of Quincy, the mayor of Weymouth, and he did stand up after a little prodding from the people, but he knew the government was going to put that in. He said from the beginning, folks, it's going in. Let's take the bribe money now that they're offering and just go. Oh, when I heard that, I said, listen, stand in front of, I talked to Mr. Hedlund. I said, right there in the meeting, I said, stand in front of that bulldozer with us when they come, so they can't knock over those buildings and put that thing up. That thing just gets my blood boiling. And, I'll be active about issues like that. I will be active. I will be there at those meetings. I will fight that ugly thing down there. And we don't need it. Thank you. That's it.
On to Noel, and a reminder, the question was what would you propose to address environmental inequities? The end part of the question. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for repeating the question for me. This dates back to the first year of being on the city council for myself, 2016 into 2017, where Margaret LaForest was the Ward 1 councilor and Brad Crow was the Ward 2 councilor, working with Weymouth as well I've supported and I've co-sponsored and sponsored resolutions against the compressor station, opposition to granting wetlands and waterway permits for the gas compressor station, have attended frac meetings for residents against the compressor station. And now it's gone into the hands of Dave McCarthy, Ward 1 councilor, and Anthony Andronico, Ward 2 councilor, because it abuts that. Prior to moving to Chickatobit Road, where we had the seawall problems, I lived on Lawn Ave from 2011 to 2014, which is right behind Dairy Queen, right next to the Florida River Bridge. I lived at 41 Lawn Ave, and it's out my backyard, and I can look, and there's it's right there on the Florida River Basin. So lived there for 3 years, had a child over there in that particular area of the city. So it's near and dear to my heart to make sure that our residents are safe. This is a battle that's going to continue to happen. We've been out in front of this as much as we possibly could, working with the delegation over at as well as the politicians over in Weymouth as well, mayors, senators, state representatives. But this is something that we're going to have to continue to fight with. It's something that is an issue because there's a lot of pollutants that are going in the area, and then we're going to see what happens as the future goes on. But I've seen people getting arrested out there, standing up, actually getting arrested, going to jail, and because they were not going to allow the folks to come through to work on that particular area. So thank you for the question. Thank you for repeating it. And I hope I could have elaborated a little bit differently to what my colleagues have answered. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're at our final question for the at-large council candidates, and this will go first to Noel DeBona. There will be 30 seconds to respond. What is the first thing you will do regarding the climate and environment if elected?
Well, I could say, as I've been elected, I could say that I've brought forth resolutions that have come into fruition right now. It's not that when you get elected, or re-elected, you're going to go back out and do what you said you're going to do. Proof is in the pudding. I've actually brought forth a lot of resolutions that are finally coming into fruition. Back in 2017, May 1st, I sponsored a resolution with Nina Liang and Joe Finn. We were the councilors at large at the time, with a fleet of electric vehicles in the city of Quincy. And just into fruition this past month, we have 5 new police cruisers that will be in that fleet. We're working continuously to do that. And so I'll continue to put these resolutions and these initiatives forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to Bill.
Hi, the question is, what am I going to do if elected for the climate right off the bat, correct?
Yes.
Everything possible. Period.
Could you be more specific?
I'd have to go in, evaluate the situation, gather the information from the people who know about it, and then I could make a decent answer then. I can't give you a decent answer now. I'd have to study it.
Thank you. Next to Anne.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for this evening. As a counselor, I represent your voice. To know what our city's needs are, I actively listen to the people who live in our community, and I represent you at the conversations at planning boards, zoning boards, and conservation. I stand with neighbors and organizations like your organizations. I take phone calls, return calls, emails, text messages, Zoom meetings. I sit at my kitchen table with constituents to help them mobilize and organize them so that their voices can be heard at these meetings. I've also started a podcast to discuss the very issues that impact the quality of life in our city, and I'm always independent, and I stand up as your representative. I'm asking truly tonight to continue this job. I ask for your help, I ask for your vote, and I want to continue to do the work collaboratively with all of you so that we can move our city to a brighter time in the future where we can actually be proud of the work that we're doing and make sure that everybody's voice is being heard and that you understand what our needs are. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to talking to you all again soon in person.
Nina.
Thank you. So what's the first thing I would do regarding the climate and the environment if I were to be able to be lucky enough to get reelected? I would continue to expand on the language access project that I've been working on. Right now, it's funded well enough that we can hit some major departments across the city, but I want to make sure that we expand that so it's a resource, not just for all of the departments across the city, but also for the partnerships we have in our local community groups, such as, again, the ones that are hosting us here tonight. I think that that will help to support some of the issues that I'd spoken about that I really want to make sure we're championing all together, such as, again, the citywide rezoning, which first starts with an assessment of where we currently stand, and then making sure that we're including mobility and access to all of that work moving forward. We talked a lot today about electrifying our buildings. I think that that could be something that we then have a trickle-down effect to all the residents we have across the city as well. And then last but certainly not least, accessible and reliable transportation is something that I've been championing for a long time. I feel like we are still so far from the mark of making sure that, that other, parent down in Germantown has reliable bus service to get out of there, to get into the train, to get to work. And so we still have a long way to go, but it does require partnerships. It does require language access to make sure that, again, all of the information, all of the work we're putting out there as counselors in collaboration with city departments can be translated down to the residents who want to take advantage of this work. So the first thing I would do is continue that work, make sure that we can create funding to expand on the access plan, and then continue to work with community groups to go from there.
Okay. Thank you to all of our candidates and everyone participating this evening. This concludes the first portion of the evening, so our at-large candidates are welcome to log off at this point. And I will pass the moderator baton over to my fellow QCAN board member, Keith Johnson. Keith.
Hello, folks. I feel like I might have to take roll call here in the terms of who's on. Dave McCarthy, are you here?
I am present, sir.
Okay, thank you. And Joe, I know you're here. Anthony is here. Steve Perdios is here. I don't think Ian Kane is here, right? Okay, and Brian's here.
I'm just going to chime in, suggesting if the ward counselor candidates could put their ward number in their name. If you know how to do that, you can control click on your.
That's a great idea.
Right click on your Zoom name and then add your ward number, if you don't mind, if you can.
And Steve Cristo, is he here? Okay. All right. So I just wanted to get the list. My name is Keith Johnson. I'm on the board of QCAN. I'll be reading some questions for you tonight. And the first question is name something you've done to help the environment in your capacity as a counselor or as a private citizen if you're not an elected official. And we'll start with Dave McCarthy.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank everyone. I was on for a little bit watching the questions that were put to the Council at Large folks, and they're all good, common sense questions that you folks have prepared, and there were a lot of good answers. One of the things that I've tried to bring to the table down in Ward 1 in the city, but particularly Ward 1, as I try to take care of that, is to pay attention to the marshlands, the wetlands that are in the ward, together with working the seawall project and working with other projects down there on the coastline. I would continue to stay focused on the seawall project that we're wrapping up now, phase 1, and also stay on top of the next project that's coming up, which is phase 2 that runs from Manor Ave down to Bayswater. I think it's really important. We're kind of on a roll here. The administration works well with me in regards to getting a lot of things done. So we have time. Try to keep moving forward in the ward and keep my eyes and ears open to all the residents down there in regards to the wetlands, the marshlands, and anything to protect the environment.
Thanks, Dave. These are each 30-second questions. So go ahead, Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Murphy. I'm running for Ward 1. This is my 3rd attempt. I want to thank QCAN and all you guys for showing up to listen tonight. This is my favorite event of the campaign season. After I ran for office in 2017, I joined QCAN. I had stopped in during my campaign to see what was going on, see what was being discussed, and I fell in love with the organization. And since then, I've been involved in a lot of our initiatives. Most notably, I was very involved in our awareness campaign for the single-use plastic bag ban and the switch over to reusable bags. I've written letters to the editor on behalf of QCAN, and I've just shown up and not been satisfied with the status quo. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Anthony Andronico.
There you go.
30 seconds.
Thank you very much for the question. Just very briefly, as a private citizen, as a staff member up at the State House, as a school committee member, and now as a ward councilor, the number one issue that we've been tackling is fighting against the compressor station. I'm proud to have spoken up at public meetings. I'm very proud that my very first resolution as a city councilor was to demand the immediate shutdown of the compressor station after there were unplanned toxic gas releases there. And then going back to some other accomplishments during my time on the school committee, when I was vice chair, I fought for and ultimately was able to work with my colleagues to transition away from styrofoam products at all of our lunch programs, implement a composting pilot program within Quincy Public Schools. And, looking ahead, I think there's a lot more work that we can do in regards to cleaning up the environment and making sure that Quincy's prepared for climate change. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Steve.
Wow. Hi. My name's Steve Perdios, candidate for Ward 2 City Council, and I'm very, very excited to be here. I'm a longtime member of QCAN. I'm a longtime environmentalist, and this is a great question to ask. I'm excited to answer this, so let me get to it. In 2000, I started an organization which was the predecessor to QCAN. I started the Quincy Environmental Network with Sally Owen. We had a whole 10 years worth of successes for the environment. Our biggest success I'll hit on now is, I led the effort to bring the Community Preservation Act to the city of Quincy. That has radically changed our city for the better. It's brought in millions of dollars, and we've seen improvements in our environment from one end of the city to the other. All of the open space preservation purchases since have all been because of the CPA, which I'm very proud of. So very happy to be here. Thank you, QCAN, for all you're doing. Thank you for tonight.
Thank you. Brian Palmucci.
Good evening. First question, passed. Can I save up all my 30 seconds to the end and just give one really good answer? Also, thank you for hosting us tonight. I just realized in listening to Perdios's answer that QEN doesn't exist anymore. And I wonder why he's been cashing my $50 checks for the past 10 years. Listen, what I'll do and what I've done in the past is continue to do the best we can as a city. We have limited funding. We're not the federal government. We can't print our own money. We're not the state. We have to use what little money we have that doesn't go to direct day-to-day services to try and undertake some of these big projects, whether it's seawall improvements, resiliency along our coast. In my first term as city councilor, we had significant flooding down in the O'Rourke Field area and really all West Quincy. And we did a $22 million project to really rework all of the drainage in West Quincy. Recently, we did that again in Kinkhead Park. If anyone's been over there, it's a beautiful park, open space. What most people don't know is the reason why it cost $4 million is because it was a $3 million flood relief project for that area in a $1 million park. So the answer to the question is I'll continue to do what we can do at any opportunity that arises. When we have the funds to do it, when we can bond it, and when it makes sense to help out residents who need some sort of relief from the effects of climate change.
Thanks, Brian. Steve Christo, I heard that you might be here. Here you are. Yeah.
I am. So what I've done, well, first off, thanks everybody for having me here. I appreciate it. What I've done in my personal life is I've done the best I can to make sure we compost, recycle, and do everything we can as a household, as well as my family's household. My professional life, I worked for a large construction company. I was involved in many LEED certified projects. So I think I could bring that value into the council, something that I had not noticed the members having. And I look forward to working with QCAN in the future to make sure that we can move forward and stop talking about what we should be doing and why we haven't been doing it and how to move forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Chuck Phelan next.
Thank you. I thank QCAN for the time and the forum. I think these are very important to get issues out on. One of the first things I did before I became the city council, I was city council last time, I was part of the group that brought recycling to Quincy and voted to put that in and start compost recycling and all that. All that came under, it was back in the early 90s, the last time I was on the city council. Since I've got on the city council, one of the big things I did was when there was a big development slated for the Beachcomber site. Actually, the day I was sworn in, I went down for the hearing from the DEP and put together money to work with the mayor, work with the city council, the Community Preservation Act, and work to get that to take that site and actually turn it into both a flood mitigation project and a passive park, which we were in the process of getting the permitting for. And in the end, there'll be trees and plants, and it will not only work to help with the resiliency along the coast, but it will provide another great natural resource to the residents of Ward 5 and the residents of the city of Quincy. That's something I do. Even on my house, I had solar panels. So I agree. I think it's a problem, and I'll continue to do that if elected.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it. So the next question is going to be asked by Paige Wetzel from the Quincy for transformative change. Paige.
I don't actually see her on here anymore, so I'll just ask the question for her.
Oh, okay.
And okay, so the question was asked earlier in the evening, and you all will have 1 minute each. We'll start with Chuck Phelan. 83% of Quincy residents live in environmental justice communities, areas that have any of the following characteristics: low income, a high percentage of people of color, and a high rate of non-native English speakers. Some neighborhoods with 2 or more qualifying characteristics, like Germantown and Quincy Point, border the Four River Basin, a longtime industrial site that houses a newly built natural gas compressor station. Even before the compressor station went in, these neighborhoods had elevated rates of heart attacks, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease hospitalizations, and lung cancers, all of which may be due to environmental pollution. These same neighborhoods have fewer trees than the average Quincy neighborhood, which means they are more prone to extreme heat and flooding. What ordinance, if any, will you propose to address these environmental inequities?
Thank you for the question. One of the things I would do is obviously when we're planting trees, some of these areas are not my area, but I do have several areas that are large communities of color. And one of the things we've tried to do is make sure the trees are dispersed evenly through the ward, meeting with the natural resources director to make sure that the replanting of trees goes in equitably across the entire ward, and making sure that people have access to it. I agree with President Liang, who brought up the thing, and a lot of it has to do with us getting the information out, not only getting it out in English, but getting it out to the various different languages and having translating services. And to solve a lot of these problems, you need to be able to get that out. And I have supported several measures that are brought in that we have these translating services available for the various communities here in Quincy.
Steve, Krista?
You're on mute, Steve. You're on mute.
Uh-oh.
I don't
I'll
see him,
take
Maggie.
30 seconds.
Sorry, I'm not very good at this part of the thing. So, and my wife's like, oh, there we are. Is that better?
There you are.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry about that. That's a very good question. And the first time when I read that question, what I was concerned with is where have we been all this time as it relates to the other inequalities in the community? When you look at the statistics that Maggie read, it's kind of stunning that we're talking about this and haven't done very much about it as a city. And so my thought in going forward here is that we really need to take these issues and break them apart and see what we can do to help the residents that are suffering from these inequalities. How you go about doing that, I think it's based on communication, as everybody else said, but there's things that we can do, as a community, as people, looking at everybody as the same people of a community. And I think that's a very, very important thing. Quincy's broken up in different parts, and particularly in Ward 5, if you look at, the broad areas that were spoken about earlier, but those inequalities are rampant all throughout Ward 5. There's no trees in certain sections and the like, and then we plant trees where they shouldn't be planted. There's a lot we could be doing here, but I still have to ask the question as why we haven't done as much as we can to date.
Thank you. Sorry, Brian next.
Yes. All right. First of all, I have a problem with your question because you talk about these neighborhoods and you left out probably the only other neighborhood other than the two you mentioned, which is Brewer's Corner. So as the representative of Brewer's Corner, I took note of that. But to answer the question, the pandemic has really revealed the widening disparities in our society, right, and in our city. I think you have areas of concentrated poverty that are economically, perhaps racially segregated. And there also can be pollution hotspots, right? Because that's where these things go, is neighborhoods where people don't vote or they're not involved or they seem like they can be marginalized. That's the history of development in a city, right? What we need to do as a city, and let me just say, in my ward, it's the same, right? So Ward 4 is bisected by Route 93, right? And highway pollution is one of the worst pollutions there is that can impact where someone lives. It causes not only heightens and worsens asthma. Oh, really? But it can cause asthma. I have other answers. I'll answer the rest of this question in 30-second bits throughout the night. Don't laugh at me, Perdios.
Sorry, you did it yourself.
It's Steve Perdios.
Okay, great. So like Brian, I guess I kind of take a little question with the question itself. First of all, the direct, what ordinance, if any, would you propose? I don't know if an ordinance is the right way to go about this, but I will tell you that if there are elevated rates of heart attacks and chronic and disease in general in Ward 2, I want to know about it like tomorrow, not if or when. If I win, I want to know tomorrow, and we should be working on it immediately. I don't know if there's an average number of trees anywhere in the city, or how do you calculate an average number of trees? I'm not sure if we have fewer trees in Ward 2 or in Quincy Point. I'm a longtime Quincy Point resident, and so this is a question hits home to me. We need to jump on this and find out if there are elevated health risks. We should be attacking that with our health department right away. So I don't have any interest in sitting back and waiting for elected officials to solve these problems. Let's get at it right now.
Anthony Andronico.
Thank you, and I absolutely appreciate the sentiment that we do need to be putting in this work, and we can't be waiting around to actually do it. As a staff member in the state Senate working for Senator O'Connor, it took us years to actually get the DEP to listen to us to put an air monitoring station within the Fall River Basin for the first time. the numbers that they had used in terms of air quality to say that you can put a compressor station on 4 acres of land next to a waterway in an environmental justice zone was 9 miles away in the Blue Hills. And now we finally have the data here that backs up why it's such a horrible project for the area and why similar projects to it shouldn't be happening within the Fall River Basin. But to get back to the actual question about, how do we overcome this? How do we address environmental justice needs? It's not just about planting more trees, right? There's a few different things that we need to be doing to make sure we address these concerns. And overall, it's about making sure people have proper access to public transit, whether it's getting to the T or bus routes through biking or walking accessibility. It's about encouraging green space within our developments themselves. And it's about transitioning to just more environmentally friendly building practices as well. So there's a few different things that we need to be looking at, but I am proud of the work that we've been able to do thus far in terms of this issue. Thanks.
Thank you. Joe Murphy?
Hi, thank you. I want to thank my friend Faye and fellow QCAN board member for reminding me recently that the first thing we all have to do is acknowledge the problem, and acknowledge that Quincy has terrible EJ statistics. A lot of communities do, but we certainly do. And going from the general to specific, our global climate problems would be a lot better if there weren't communities that we were willing to dump on. And I mean that literally and as a pun. So if we treat the people in these communities like the tools that we put next to them for prosperity and advancement, the whole planet suffers. We're seeing that now. So if we reverse that and start looking out for these communities, we'll see the planet start to improve too. So practically, I want there to be acknowledgement. I'd love to push the mayor's office to create an environmental justice page on the website. I'd like to publish a map showing where the environmental justice communities are. I want the zoning board and the planning board and the conservation board to take a look, everything that comes before them. Is this in an EJ community? What does it do to the community on an environmental level? And finally, as far as an ordinance, if we open up and we acknowledge the EJ community status, we open up lines of more funding to plant more trees and do more projects to help these communities. Thank you.
Thank you. David McCarthy?
Thank you. In regards to the Fall River Basin, I mean, there's probably a lot of people on here who know that the shipyard was there for many years, Procter & Gamble, and it was a dumping ground for businesses that weren't good for Germantown and Quincy Point. Over the last couple of years, my relationship with James Maratis, the Quincy Housing Authority Director, has been really good. He's had a tree program, a cleanup program in Germantown. We've cleaned up the Bow Street Marsh, and we're going to stay at it. We're looking to put a walking path and trees around Germantown in the near future. Germantown hasn't looked this good in a lot of years, but sad to say, the Fall River Basin is still there. The compressor station that all of us were fighting against ended up happening, and it's a tough area, but we'll keep working at Germantown in regards to trees, in regards to keeping it clean and helping those people down there all the time. I try to make it a priority to be in Germantown quite a bit and try to make sure that Mr. Maratis and the Housing Authority that really dictates that end of Germantown is on his game, and he usually is. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith?
Yes, so this next question reads, the Next Generation Climate Bill passed earlier this year requires the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources develop a net zero stretch code on building energy use. Would you support adoption of the net zero stretch code by Quincy once the code is released in late 2020? A net zero building is any building whose yearly energy consumption is equal to or less than the renewable energy it produces on site or offsets. In Quincy, buildings account for over 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions. Quincy adopted the current stretch code for buildings in 2010, but that code does not reflect current best practice.
Thank you for the question, Keith.
Anthony
Just
first.
generally regarding the next generation climate bill, I was able to watch that bill go through the legislature over the last 2 years. It took a few sessions in order to do it. In fact, my boss was one of the 6 legislators responsible for negotiating the final language of that bill, one of the 6 to do that. So it was really proud to play a role in the back end as a staff member, figuring out what proposals should we put forward, what do we want to keep in there, and just moving forward. Quincy has bought in to the net zero stretch code in terms of from 2010 for buildings. And I see no reason for us to stop now. And I'd love for us to be able to join in again when those final regulations come out in 22, so that we can continue to be a part of the solution.
Great, thank you. Steve.
Hi, I assume you mean me.
Yes.
Yes, I'll support whatever we can do for an ordinance to improve to get our buildings closer to net zero as possible. I think in the bigger picture, there's already been a lot of great ideas talked about tonight, but there doesn't seem to be a good path forward. So if I'm able to get on the city council, I won't be a councilor that waits for you to call me. I'll be calling you, and I'll be looking at you to help us come up with a plan for really what the city needs is some master planning around the environment. And so I'll begin events around the city to reach out to environmentalists and get a good sense of putting together a master plan for our environment. Where do we want to be? Net zero emissions is just one topic. The whole bike issues, the whole variety of issues related to the environment. Let's put a plan together, a master plan together. Where do we want to see our city? We did a little bit through Quincy 400, but I think there's a lot more that we can do for planning.
Thanks, Steve. Dave McCarthy.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah, I think we were asked this a couple of years ago, and the net zero possibility I thought was a reach, to tell you the truth. I've looked at a lot of information on net zero, and it is a great goal to go after. But I need to look at more facts realistically in Quincy to make sure that what we put contractors on with a building, larger building, let's say in Quincy, to try to drop down emissions, that it does work and we just don't go through the motions. There's a lot of things that happen out there where you approve certain things, and if you don't hold their hand to the fire, later on down the road, you find out that you went through the motion. So I would have to look at this a little deeper to make sure that if we come up with an ordinance or we agreed with an ordinance, that it was going to work, and it was going to work the best way for all of Quincy, the folks that are developing, the folks that are living here, and make sure it reflects the current best practices.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Joe Murphy.
All right, is this a 1 minute answer?
I'm sorry, a 30-second.
30-second. Okay. Yes, I would support the stretch code. The fact is, we did it in 2010, and what we'll be doing by embracing it again is letting the builders and the developers know that we are going to always want the best for our city. So if we did it in 2010 and we do it again in 2022, I mean, then the builders will be able to plan a little better, because they'll know that Quincy is one of these cities where they want their environment, their buildings environmental. And yeah, net zero is a reach. And every time you feel like thinking net zero is a reach, remember that the planet is on fire and we need to reach a little bit. And holding hands to the fire is our job. So, or it will be if I'm elected. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Steve Christo. You're on mute, Steve.
Okay.
Here you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, absolutely. I would support the adoption of a net zero code for Quincy, and I think we should always strive and utilize best practices. I've heard a lot about discussion about stretch goals and the like, but we always should work as hard as we can to fix this problem. There's many other, communities around the country that are doing this. They're requiring buildings to be, put in brand new, with the developers because they want to come into these communities, but we should make them so they, come to a net zero when they implement them and when they develop them. They should build it through the build phase and the design phase, and we should always look to do that and put their feet to the fire.
Chuck Phelan.
Yeah, thank you. I would support using the stretch code. We brought it in 2010. I wasn't on the council, but I was working for the city at that time, and I think it's an important tool to help with the climate change. And I think it's also important that we let people know up front, this is what you have to do. And when you put these laws up front, people know up front, they can plan on them and they can, make it. Some of the stuff we did in 2010, I remember being around here and that was a little controversial, but now people are flowing with it. And I think this is something that's really happening and we need to come up with solutions to help that. And we'll also keep Quincy moving in the direction of the green community where we can get state money to help continue our battle with climate change. So the answer is yes, I would support it.
Brian.
Yes, I'm going to finish my answer to the last one, but I'm open to anything. I'm not familiar with the details of it. So climate justice is really racial and economic justice as well, right? You have to look at it as a whole package. We were talking about these neighborhoods, right? These 3 neighborhoods you guys mentioned too. I added one in. Is there a disparity in how these neighborhoods are treated overall, right? I don't know. Does one neighborhood, do some neighborhoods, wealthier neighborhoods have more trees? Do they have better access to public transportation? Are these neighborhoods pollution hotspots? Do they have language barriers preventing participation? Language or cultural barriers? I don't know. You know how we would know is if we had somebody who worked in the city government who could look into these kind of things and they could report back and be transparent to the city council, the school committee, the mayor, and most importantly, the community, and find better ways to engage folks and solve some of the problems we have. If we don't look,
Sorry.
Thanks. So the next question will be asked by Maggie Maggie McKee from the Quincy Tree Alliance. There she is.
Okay. So companies that do business with the city sometimes also donate to candidates for elected office. For example, in 2018, the City Council awarded Bogan Tree Service a $244,000 contract to remove 300 large street trees without first having a list of trees that were deemed unsafe to the public and in need of removal. Campaign finance records show that in the previous 2 calendar years, Bogan Tree's owner donated $750 to 2 of the city councilors who voted for that contract to be awarded. And developers who may need to cut down trees or plan green spaces have donated tens of thousands of dollars to city officials. Would you commit to refusing these contributions, which represent at least the appearance of a conflict of interest?
Maggie, could you tell us before we take turns answering who the councilors were?
They were Dave McCarthy and Brad Kroll.
Thank
you. Sorry, okay. Let's start with Brian Palmucci.
Sure. If you think that somebody giving $750 between 2 candidates, someone giving me or any other of my colleagues $300 buys a vote, then you're out of your mind, right? You're out of your mind. I know Mark Bogan. I think he's a good business owner. He operates a business in Ward 4. He's excellent for the community. I honestly don't like the implication of the question is that our votes can be bought, right? Whether or not we have trees marked, we actually have GIS. We've mapped through GIS every single one of the trees in the city of Quincy. So we know which ones need to be repaired and which ones don't. And we have to follow the shady tree law, the Shade Tree Act by the state that dictates how and when a tree can be cut down in the city. We have an arborist who makes those determinations. So it's not the city council voting on some sort of contract. I've been up there and served with both those individuals. I can tell you they, as well as myself and anybody else, wouldn't make a decision like that based on our campaign contributors. But also, I have no recollection of this vote or there being some sort of award of contract. But that stuff has nothing to do with how we make decisions. We put together like I think it's like 40 to 60 trees per week during 1 second. 40 to 60 trees we plant per week during the planting season. We could do more, and I think we have to do more.
Thank you. Okay, so now off to Chuck Phelan.
Thank you. First of all, anytime there are contracts awarded, the city council votes on the number. We don't vote on who gets the contract. It goes through what's called Chapter 30B, which is the buying and purchasing laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And those things are put out. In terms of if I would take money, I mean, everybody has taken some money. There's no question. I prefer taking it from large groups of people that are my residents and campaigns. If it was something where I was voting on a project and it was coming before the city council, I would not accept the money. But a lot of these projects are not coming before the city council. When we vote the money, it then goes to the departments who at that point are in charge of going out and making sure the buying and purchasing laws are done. They're pretty rigid and they're pretty tough to get through. But thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Steve Christo.
Okay, I'm okay. So, my thing is, I think corporate money should be out of any campaign. I don't agree with Citizens United, up at the federal level and where it trickles down. So I certainly wouldn't accept those monies, not understanding fully, how the inner workings of City Hall goes and what goes out to bid and who to who. But, I will, maintain that, I won't take any money from somebody that is going to, try to influence a project or a campaign or anything.
Dave McCarthy.
Yes, I would take contributions again from Mr. Bogan. The Bogans are a Hausneck family. They're a fine family. Mark runs a great business. If anybody here doesn't understand that Quincy is overwhelmed with tree issues, then they shouldn't be on this call tonight. For us to jump in with that $244,000 contract to remove 300 large trees, and Mr. Bogan has helped us out in various other spots with really unsafe trees in the past and in the present. He runs a great business. Taking that contribution had nothing to do with Bogan Tree Service. It could be any tree service. We needed help. We needed to get those trees up before somebody got hurt. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Murphy.
Okay, I hope we can save the false shock and awe about this question. Okay, because there's people in this call that have far too money in their OCPF reports. Far too much, way too much for a municipal candidate. Okay, personally, I don't like taking money. I'm not taking money from anyone anymore. I'm just going to run without money. Anything I'll put in, it will be in my OCPF report. The city, one of the biggest donors, got slapped in 2018 with a $250,000 fine for funneling donations through their employees. So let's just skip the 750 is not that much. That's just, what they're talking about. Answer the question legitimately. And hey, guys, stay on time. Thank you.
Okay, Steve Perdios.
Hi, thanks for the question. I know that there are very honest city councilors, and I know that they probably want to do the right thing. But the idea of an ordinance is not to protect us against, or laws are not to protect us against people who are going to do the right thing. It's against people who may do the wrong thing. And so, within my first 100 days, I will put an ordinance forward to boost the city's overall ethical bar that we have to meet. And I would say right off the bat, we shouldn't be accepting donations from anybody that is in line to receive a contract or has received a contract within the city of Quincy. I certainly wouldn't accept that, and I think that it would go a long way to removing if not real impropriety, the idea of an impropriety. So I think it also goes to where we. Okay, thanks. There you go, Joe.
I'll do my best to keep this to the 30 seconds. Just very briefly, I do know that there are hundreds of requests for trees to be trimmed within the city, so I absolutely understand why there was a need to go out there and for an outside contractor. But just generally, when it comes to campaign finance issues, as a state employee, I'm completely removed from that process. I can't ask people for donations. I can't handle a check that someone gives me. I can't say who you're going to talk with about it. And it's completely separated from the work that I do. I appreciate the work my committee does on my behalf, but to be quite honest, that's their work. And I appreciate those that, support our campaign. Thank you.
Okay, so I am up next to ask this question. Let me read the question. What is the first thing you will do regarding climate/environment if elected? These are 30-second answers each. Joe, you're first. Joe Murphy.
Well, first thing I would do if I was elected is I would do a quick review with my colleagues on the council about the things that are in the pipeline. I want to know updates on the green aggregation bill and some of the other things that we've been working on. Also, I think it'd be great to get all the elected people together with some of the activists in the South Shore and start having a yearly meeting with the South Shore communities, almost like a climate summit just for us. We could start with just Quincy, but I'd like to get involved with the whole region.
Great, thanks, Joe. Dave McCarthy.
Thanks, Keith. I would continue to push, as the council has, the administration, to basically keep up with QCAN, which is a great governing stick for all of us, and keep pushing the initiatives that we discussed tonight with developers to try to head towards net zero, with developers to try to get more energy efficient in their planning at the planning stage. But keep going just as we are. Keep moving forward with electric vehicles, hybrids, the great conversation about Quincy Point and Germantown in regards to environmental issues.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Anthony Andronica.
Thank you, Keith, for the question. I think the first thing that we should be doing is reassessing our bike and pedestrian accessibility within the city of Quincy. I know in 2014, the mayor put together a commission, but then checking in sometime around 2018, I believe the report came out, there were only 3 miles worth of bike paths on Quincy roads as compared to 250 miles worth of roadways. And I think since that time, we've made a lot of strides. But even so, the bike paths that we have right now don't really encourage their use, right? They're on a busy roadway. There's nothing really separating the bike path from the busy streets. And I think that we could make it more user-friendly, and that's something that we should take a look at. And I know that not everyone's a fan of bike paths, but we've added over 10,000 people over the last decade, and we're going to need people to start, biking and walking to whether it's the bus stop or, the T stations that we have. And it's a really great way for us to make sure that we're combating the traffic problem too, so that getting around in your car is bearable as well. So you got to take that multifaceted approach, and I think that's something the city can get to work on right away.
Thanks, Anthony. Steve, Perdios.
Hi, thank you. the first thing I'll do regarding the climate and environment is call you guys. As I mentioned earlier, there's already, just in tonight's meeting, there's dozens and dozens of really good ideas, but we need to sit down and QCAN actually did this a couple of years back. You had a round table where environmentalists got together and spitballed ideas and came up with some great ideas. And we need to do that again. We need to, because you can't do everything at once. So we need to formulate the plan and then prioritize it and say, well, what are we going to tackle first? There was a question about the Quincy's wetland bylaw. It's a mess. It has never been updated. It's something that I worked with a former city councilor and John Brennan from the Concom years ago to try to do it. There's plenty of things that we can do in Quincy to make improvements in the environment, but you can't do them all at once. So the first thing I'll do is call you guys, sit down, run an environmental roundtable, and figure out what's going to be the priority. Where are we going to start with? And let's start working through that.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. Steve Christo.
Okay. Well, the first thing I would do is I would set up office hours, lots of them. I want to get to work right away, representing the wants and needs of everyone in Ward 5, particularly in the climate area. There's no issue that would be too big or too small for me, and I can't wait to start.
Great, thanks. Chuck Phelan.
Hi, I'd like to, I thank QCAN for the opportunity tonight, but also I'd like to, one of the first things I would do when I got there was continue to push the initiatives that we already have started. When buildings are coming before us, instead of looking at putting gas in, that we're looking at putting electricity and heat pumps in, something that we will be having new buildings coming on during the year next year. And also when I'm at the zoning, planning boards and conservation commissions, that when people are putting in buildings, they're also putting in green space, that they have a landscaping plan, that they will be coming in and doing that. And also listening to various groups, particularly like QCAN and everything, who's brought up some great ideas and things we should be moving towards. And I think you can't say there's just one thing, there's a whole bunch of things. And time is of the essence, so we need to get started on these things right away. And also the stretch ordinance I'll be looking to pass when I could. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Brian Palmochi.
Thank you. Before I answer the question, Joe, difference between your campaign and mine is for the past 4 years, you've been trying to raise money and get votes, and you're just not very good at it. So what I would focus on in the next 2 years of my term would be I think what we need to do is set some priorities for the city. Set a goal for, net zero municipal buildings, right? Any municipal buildings we should be, that we're creating in the future should be net zero. We have a one-time opportunity here, perhaps a once-in-a-generation opportunity that my colleague, Mr. Andronico, has started to bring to the attention of the council and get us more involved, which is the massive amount of federal funding that's been granted to the city. We have approximately $30 million. There hasn't been one single public discussion about what we're going to do with that money. Not a single one. I also think, so we can meet some of these goals using some of that money, this one-time money. I also think that in terms of planning, we need to shift to a fee-based land use. It's more equitable and it's better for the long-term uses of Quincy land for environmental purposes.
Thanks, Brian. So at this point, we're going to move on to the ward questions. And Brian, you can bail out if you want, or listen in if you want.
Oh, I'll listen in. I like it.
Okay.
Thanks for having us.
Right. So this is a Ward 5 question. Passenger vehicles are responsible for a quarter of Quincy's greenhouse gas emissions. What would you do on the city council to increase the use of public transportation? And Chuck Phelan first. This is 1 minute each. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think there are a lot of areas. I think some of the times I've been down campaigning at the Wollaston MBTA station, you see a lot of people that are not taking it. Some of it has been pandemic related, and you don't see a full parking lot like you used to anymore. I think some of the things we can do is there are initiatives right now with TPAL where they are applying for grants, which I would support, that would bring in where buses that are full. It will work with our current infrastructure on lights So it would also allow that light to remain green to help get these full buses back to where they're going and help with traffic flow. The other thing is when developments are coming in and they say we're going to use transit use, and they're saying they're going to be transit. Well, one of the things is when they built the hospital, one of the things they asked about was, are you going to have shuttle buses to get people to the trains? I think it's important that they don't just say they're transit-oriented developments, that they show that they're going to be promoting transit and supporting transit. Some of this stuff is with the MBTA, so I'll work with the state reps and the senators and to move that forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Chuck. Steve.
All right, thank you. I'm a big proponent of public transportation. I've used public transportation my whole life. I used the bus system when I was younger with my family to get around the city. And I was around when the Red Line started its operation. One way to make a difference or an impact is to lead by example. So utilizing as much public transportation as possible. I would also, like to see the usage and increase over time of MBTA. And I think our infrastructure needs to be ready for when the T and everything becomes online and becomes more utilized. The other thing I would like to see, and I know there was talk about this in the past, but I'd like to see the use of electric buses, for instance. And I think would be a great thing if we could get out of Ward 5, that bus station that's currently there by the stadium. And if we could relocate that and move it to the Lowe's Plaza or whatever they call it, I think that would be a good move, and it would get us into an electric mode, at least that we a start. And I think we should look to see to do that.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This next question will be asked by Pam Brennan from Quincy Making Waves.
Thank you. Since the 2018 storms, many small cottages and house-neck neighborhoods that saw 6 to 8 feet of storm flooding have been replaced by much larger buildings. Sea levels are rising and storms are intensifying with climate change. So we can expect more emergency rescues in flood zones and in the future. The 2019 Quincy Multi-Hazard Mitigation Plan suggests reducing risk, by changing zoning laws to avoid new construction in flood-prone areas. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers also suggests that the city buy properties in the flood-prone Willow section of Howe's Neck to restore the marsh there. If elected, would you support ordinances to ban new construction and have the city buy properties in flood-prone areas? Thank you.
I guess it's my turn. No, I don't think this solution that we're talking about here is fully thought through. I would certainly encourage and see that the new construction in flood-prone areas was a little more rigid, and make sure they're elevated, they're built up, they have a drainage plan. But no, I wouldn't tell people they couldn't build in their own property. And I certainly wouldn't commit to having the government buy every flood-prone property that comes on the market. It's not sustainable. Not only would we not have the money to do it, we would not have the money to maintain it, and we can't afford to lose any more tax rolls. So that, as much as I wanted to help this plan, this isn't the right move. And the city has bought more than enough real estate.
I'm up, I guess. To answer this, there's a few sections that jump out at me in Ward 1. The Rockland Street area down by Rhoda Street by the Crusher. The Residence B area that runs up C Street right now on the berm side, and then Post Island, just to name a few there. I agree with Joe about not going in and telling people you can't build on your property. At the same time, what's going on now, and I sit in on all the zoning meetings and Concom, those adjustments are being made. I am concerned with the Residence B area that runs from Palmer Street down to the Willows on the right side, the boardwalk side, because it is Res B. So we go back and forth a lot. with folks that have small cottages that'll sell to a contractor, and he'll try to go 3 stories up. And some of them have worked out, some of them haven't worked out. I think the majority of them, as we move forward, are not going to work out. It's going to have to be something smaller, and definitely it's going to have to go by the rules of Concom and raising a home, et cetera, down there, especially in that marsh area.
Okay, I think that's my question next. So, I think this is actually going to be the last question of the evening, and it's going to go to Ward 2 candidates. So this is a tree question. I've got my QTA hat on. Trees form the city's living infrastructure, cleaning the air, reducing flooding, and keeping us cooler in a warming world. The Department of Natural Resources can help them function at their peak if it completes an inventory of the city's trees, which will help identify trees that are most in need of maintenance, addresses any maintenance issues as early as possible, and plants a variety of new trees. What will you do to increase funding for this work? 1 minute each, starting with Steve Perdios.
What will I do to increase funding for this work? Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to planning because we can't do everything at once. So there needs to be an assessment of how much are we putting into our street trees? Is it enough? There's a limited amount of funding on a year-to-year basis, even though our city budget is astronomical. I've been an advocate for trees my whole life, and I've fought to preserve trees in many different areas around the city. And so I've worked with people from the Natural Resources Department to preserve some trees and to have more planted. So anything we can do, I certainly would use the bully pulpit to promote more trees within the city. One idea is we have some areas where we need to restore some wetlands. We should develop our own tree farm so that we're bringing the cost of trees down. There's areas, wetlands around Faxon Park that we could definitely utilize as a tree farm to build more, to grow more trees so that we have cultivated trees that we can get for a much lower price, so we can plant more around the city. So there's a lot of good ideas out there, but we've got to have some opportunity to have planning so that we can look at where do we want to go. Is trees the #1 issue, or is it net zero buildings, or is it more bike paths? A whole variety of topics here. So first step, let's get some planning done so that we can look at the big issue of the environment overall and find out where we need to go. This is probably my last chance to talk, so I just want to say thank you to QCAN for the great event tonight. I know how hard these are. I put the first environmental candidates night on within the city of Quincy back in 2002 when it was Sheets versus Phelan years ago, and they're not easy to do. So tip of the hat to you guys for putting together a great event.
Thank you. And Maggie, could you just remind me what the time limit is on the answer for this question?
It's 1 minute.
1 minute. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. But just getting back to the issue of trees, and we're talking about planning for where we need to plant them, regular maintenance. I probably call our tree warden, Chris Hayward, 5-6 times a week at this point with tree requests within the city. I feel like, every time I'm calling him with a request or another or 2 requests, he's barely getting back to the first one. And it's not because of lack of will. It's such a small team. And I think at any given time, they have about 300 to 400 requests. So getting to all of these is just impossible, right? And so as far as support and what we can actually do so that they can do their work well, so we can get back to constituents when they actually have an issue and make sure we maintain the health of our trees. It's about talking with the mayor's office about expanded support. It's about talking with Commissioner Murphy at the Department of Natural Resources to see if he is able to, lend from other departments to bring guys over to help out with the work, within the tree department specifically. So in general, I know it would be great to have sort of a master plan in terms of taking stock, but I think we need to maintain what we have right now. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you. so much, everyone, for coming. I would like to thank the candidates and our partner organizations and the public for coming. This will be the end of the event. We will post the full recording on our YouTube site and on the QCAN website by Saturday morning. And then we're going to divide up into the specific questions so that if anyone wants to see answers by candidate, they will. That will take about a week. So please share the link so that your neighbors and friends can see it. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks for everybody participating and for everybody in the audience. Thank you all.